All right, I'm Samantha Anderl, co-founder of Harlow, an all-in-one tool for freelancers to manage their business. I'm a former marketing executive and also a former and current consultant for early stage tech companies. So I'm joined today by Andrea Wildt, my co-founder, and also Tim Noetzel. Tim is a freelance web developer and designer. He's a business coach, and he's the founder of Freelance GPS, where he helps freelancers by sharing his experiences and what he's learned along the way. So we're all here today to talk about relationship building and community and why it's so important. So this is actually one of my favorite topics. It's something that we talk about all of the time. You might get sick of hearing about it, but it's something I'm very passionate about, and something that we're very passionate about at Harlow. So we really try to help foster community through our newsletters, social platforms, and office hours like these. So I'm glad that it's kind of all coming together full circle. But before we dive in, I'm going to hand things over to both Tim and Andrea so that they can give our crew any other details about their background. So Andrea, let's start with you, and then we'll pass things over to Tim before we dive in.
Sure. So I'm Samantha's co-founder at Harlow, but also I've been a freelancer off and on for the past 15 years. And I will say it has looked different every single time I've dipped my toes back into freelancing. But I specialize in usually like marketing operations, demand generation, strategy, and execution. And I got my start in freelancing because of a wonderful mentor that I had. It was a relationship that brought me into freelancing and kept me there for quite a long time. So I'm really excited to have this conversation too.
Awesome. And Tim?
Awesome. Yeah. My name is Tim. I am a developer and designer. I've been doing that professionally for about 16 years. So honestly, it kind of feels like my whole life. I built my first website when I was 10. I was kind of just hooked. And I have had the chance to work with a bunch of tech startups, mainly leading design and product and development, but for the last 5 or so years, freelancing full time and kind of consulting for them. I also coach folks on how to go freelance and grow their freelance businesses at freelancegps.com. So just super excited to be here. This is definitely something I'm hugely passionate about.
Awesome. Well, we're going to start kind of at the very top, right? Like, let's just get started and talk about why community, right? Like, why should freelancers prioritize relationships and community building? Because I know a lot of freelancers go into this, they start a solo business and it can feel kind of isolating, right? So Tim, when you talk to freelancers, why do you say that community building is so important?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two reasons. One of them you kind of just alluded to, which is just, having support and people that you can lean on, when something gets rocky or just when you want to bounce ideas off of people. And I think that's hugely important. But I actually think the thing that people talk less about is how important it is just in terms of building your business and finding the right clients. I think when you look at what it's like to be a freelancer on the ground today, it's really sort of a tale of the haves and the have-nots. If freelancing is going well for you and your business is going well, you can earn a lot of money. You get to work when, where, and how you want. Interesting projects. You've got partners or clients who treat you like a partner, excuse me. But if it's not going so well, pretty much none of those things are true, right? You're fighting for every dollar. Things are really a grind. I think that like top tier freelancers tend to be charging, well above $250 an hour in terms of their effective hourly rate. The average freelancer is substantially below that. And if you're really struggling, right, it could be like $5 or $10 an hour, which is not a recipe for financial success. But I think moreover, it's not a recipe for happiness in your day to day. And I think the thing that really separates the top tier freelancers from everybody else is the quality of their clients. And how they find them. And I've found pretty much universally the folks who are doing really, really well in their freelance businesses are finding clients through their communities and through relationships and one-on-one conversations.
Yep. I I love that. When Andrew and I, well, we still run a business called Interimly, which is a boutique consulting firm. We help companies with demand gen. Um, but a majority of our business, even from the very beginning, like the day that we kicked off, we found most of our clients through relationships. It was either like previous colleagues and coworkers or relationships that we were building along the way with VCs and private equity companies. And that was so important to our business. So I love that you really dug in there as like, that can make such a huge difference, because when you already have that relationship built and somebody that trusts you is then referring you on to somebody else, there's less selling involved, right? Somebody already trusts you, they trust your work, they trust your process. That relationship just starts in a different manner.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I think it impacts pretty much every aspect of your relationship with that client, right? From how much they're willing to pay you to how they treat you, right? Like they, do they view you as a partner? Are they, paying for more than just your time? Are they actually paying for your expertise and your advice?
Yep.
And do they take feedback, or they kind of just dismiss everything that you say, right? Like all of that, I think, is impacted, and I think it oftentimes has a lot to do with just the type of client and how they're looking to find somebody, right? Like typically I've found the best clients are not on sites like Upwork, right? The types of clients that tend to be on those sites, and there's exceptions, obviously, but tend to be very cost focused, right? They're pinching pennies. They're just trying to find somebody who can take some instructions and not do a whole lot of critical thinking and just get something done. And I think there's a place for that, but I don't think it's a recipe for long-term success as a freelancer.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting point, because I think that there are different stages of freelancing too, right? So there are some freelancers who really enter into freelancing to do, task-based work, right? Whether it's like spinning up some ads if you're a designer, or whether it's a writer and you're just writing a blog post, or, whatever it is. But then as you move through your career in freelancing, like you typically want to take on those bigger projects, those more retainer-based projects, those more strategic projects. This can get like those task-focused projects can be a quick path to burnout, right? If you're just taking on like as much work as possible and just executing versus really getting to know a client, understanding their business, being strategic, and being a bigger part of the outcome, right? And feeling like your work is very, very valuable. So I love that you brought that up. And I think the way that people find freelancers, that's also a very interesting point, because I know, Andrea and I, obviously we build a software company for freelancers, right? We're also deeply involved in the community. We are also freelancers ourselves. And so we get people coming to us all the time, right? And they're like, hey, I need a writer, or I need a designer, or I need somebody to help with email marketing, or whatever it is. Who do you know? And that happens all the time.
Constantly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's an interesting thing that like even Andrea and I having those relationships with other freelancers helps us build better relationships with these people that are hiring freelancers, right? So it's really kind of this circular pattern of like why relationship building is so important. Okay, so I know we all know, because we have built our communities, we've worked on relationship building for a really long time, but it's really hard, right? Especially if you're a brand new freelancer, maybe you don't have a ton of like previous work experience. You don't have a lot of like colleagues or past coworkers to tap into for work. So if you're very new to freelancing, where would you suggest starting to build your community?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's two places to start. One of them is really just your own network. And I found the vast majority of the folks that I have coached on how to do this actually know substantially more people who are relevant than they think. Almost universally, when I talk to freelancers who are trying to learn how to do this, they say, I don't know anybody. And the reality is everybody knows somebody. right? And so, I always use the example of like, let's say your cousin works for a plumbing business, right? Chances are that plumbing business is independent and small, because the vast majority of them are, right? Probably has a logo. Somebody designed that logo, right? Probably has a website. Somebody built that website, right? And so you can see how you're actually just a couple of hops away from somebody who's really relevant if you're trying to do, web design or development or marketing or any of those kinds of things. And so the first thing I think is just think a little bit about your network and the people that you know, because chances are you know more people than you think. And I think the second place to look is just look at where the hubs are in your industry, both locally in the real world and online, right? So industry meetups, Slack groups, co-working spaces, startup accelerators, all of those types of places tend to be fantastic spots to build relationships. And so identifying a few of those and really just going and showing up and participating can make a huge difference. And you don't have to do the like sleazy networking thing where you're like working the room, right? It really can just be about, like asking for questions, asking questions, offering advice, asking for help, any of those kinds of things, right? Like people love to be helpful and they love to get help. And so those can make a huge difference.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
But I was just going to say one thing that I did early in my career that I found really helpful was actually subcontracting and consulting for agencies, because that was a way for me to build community with other consultants that were also subcontracting. I was able to work with them, so they were able to actually see my work product, build a relationship, and then as we moved on and found different clients, we would bring each other in. And so that was a really good way for me to build my network early on of other freelancers. And to your point, it's like you always know someone, or somebody knows somebody else. And I remember those very first gigs being surprised. It was, oh, this person that I worked with 4 years ago knew somebody that needed some help. It was the 3 degree connections that got me in, and then it just all starts to build on itself. So I know a lot of times we think about freelancing as building a relationship directly with the end client, but leveraging other agencies or freelancers can be super helpful in building your community as well.
Yeah, and I would say we even did that later in our career, right? So Andrea's freelanced off and on for a really long time, and then I don't even know the time frame anymore, but maybe 6 years ago we built our consulting firm together, which is really just a fancy way of saying that we were freelancing, but with one another. But even in that business, there were a ton of projects where Andrea and I were like, positioning's not really our sweet spot, but let's bring in this person to do the positioning. And then, okay, that SEO project is really, really technical. We do content strategy, but maybe we're not going to touch that. Let's bring in this other person. And all of a sudden you're developing this like vast network of people who you do a favor for by bringing them in. And then, even if it's not immediately, 2 years from now, they might do a favor by bringing you in. And it just develops this flywheel of work, right? The more relationships that you can build with, whether it's agencies or other freelancers, it's a beautiful way to get that flywheel going and really feel like you have pals who are looking out for you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm glad you mentioned other freelancers specifically. I really think they're like the number one source for new freelancers. They already know your ideal clients, they're already working with them, or they wouldn't still be in business.
Yes.
Right. And they know if it's a bad client too. Right.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And so you can get a ton of information about like, what is it actually going to be like to work with them, all of that kind of stuff. So, shameless plug, obviously, but I've got a free course at freelancegps.com that goes into like how exactly to have those conversations with other freelancers and that kind of thing. But I really think that's a great point. It's the right place to start for sure.
Yeah. Also, I'm all about the shameless plug. I'm like, always be promoting yourself. Also, speaking of freelancing and relationship building, promoting yourself is important, right? Like going back when you were talking about, you know, thinking about your network and thinking, your network is usually bigger than you think it is. And you use the plumbing example, right? Where you're like, okay, somebody owns a plumbing company and you don't think that's a relevant, resource for you, but they had a designer and they had a developer and they had a marketer and all these people. And I think it's you have to let people know what you're doing and be willing to reach out and like share that message with the world, or else nobody's going to know when and how to promote you, right? So even reaching out to your pal that owns a plumbing company and letting them know what you're doing, you just have to share your message, right? And you have to share it loud and you have to be proud of that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think the ease with which you find clients is directly proportional to how many people know that you're looking for business at
Yep.
any given time, right? And how many people who have you've had a conversation with who kind of just like have a positive view of you as a professional, right? And it doesn't
Yes.
have to be like oh, like we worked together for 5 years or we go way back, right? It can be as simple as I had a conversation with this person and she asked really smart questions.
Yes, 100%. And I think a lot of freelancers have a hard time saying that they're open to work, because it feels like if you're saying that you're open to work and that you're looking for new clients, that you don't have a successful business, right? It's sort of this like vulnerable point where freelancers are like, okay, I need a new client, but saying I need a new client makes it sound like I'm not busy enough or my client roster isn't full. And I always tell people, I'm like, you just have to nobody thinks that. You're the only person thinking that, right? Like I see people all the time sharing like, hey, I'm open to work, I'm looking for a client, here's exactly what I do. And I think it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to promote yourself and kind of take the ego out of it and say, like, I actually have to do what's best for my business. And that's self-promoting and that's being vulnerable. And that's actually reaching out to people, whether it's previous clients or my freelance friends, or just posting about it on social media, right? It's just, I think that's part of relationship building, is like removing the ego.
Totally. And I think honestly, sometimes it can even be viewed in the exact opposite light. Like I have a close friend and colleague who does marketing, like paid social work.
Mhm.
And he had a client churn, and I was basically like sending emails to several of my clients as soon as I heard that, being like, you have to talk to Josh. Like he's a top marketer in this niche in the Boston area. He's absolutely fantastic. He hasn't had any availability in months.
Yes.
You should talk to him. And so I think that kind of attitude of like, oh, okay, like yeah, of course, like sometimes relationships end, right? You can be working with a client for years, and through no fault of your own, it's just their business changed, or they're changing strategies, or you've outgrown them, they've outgrown you. Like that's okay, it's common, it happens to everybody, and it doesn't mean that like you're a failure or your business is a failure or anything like that.
100%. And I think that comes down a little bit to positioning, right? Like it was really great that you were able to position your friend and colleague this way, right? You're like, this person is so rad. You're so lucky that they have availability right now. You should jump on while you can. And people can do that for themselves too, right? Like
Totally.
when they're like, hey, I'm open to work because I had a client churn and this doesn't happen, like, nab me up before somebody else does.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
I think that's exactly right.
when you think about relationship building, right? Like as freelancers, we get really busy, right? We have projects and we have deliverables to send over. We have invoices to send. We're like sending out proposals and contracts. We have all of these things going on, right? And relationship building and building community is something that's on top of that, right? So it's like on top of all this work that we're doing. Okay, now we have to build these relationships and community so we can get like this marketing flywheel going. When you talk to new freelancers, and I know that you have an entire course on this, how much time do you recommend that they spend on that part of their business, or how do you recommend they think about that?
Yeah, I think typically a couple of hours a week will actually get it done. And I think when you compare that to the time and effort you have to spend sort of with other marketing approaches, it's actually hugely efficient. right? There's a prominent course out there on like how to succeed on Upwork, and I won't point fingers and mention the exact name, but their whole philosophy is, hey, it's a volume game. If you're looking for work, you need to be submitting 25 to 50 proposals a week.
Wow.
I don't know how the hell anyone could do that.
That's a
And have those
lot.
proposals be any kind of quality in under 25 hours a week, right?
Right.
Probably even more. And that means, like, if that's your approach to marketing, right, you're going to have peaks and valleys in your business, because you can't be working on your marketing anytime you've got an actual project, right?
Yep.
So that's not going to work. Obviously, things like blogging and social take tons of time and effort to do well. And so I really think something like relationship building, where it's like, okay, like you show up to one or two events a month, or you send a couple of emails checking in with people and seeing how they're doing. You have a 15-minute video call with somebody, and just check in and see how things are going. It's hugely efficient because it keeps you top of mind. And every one of those people you talk to knows a ton of people, right? So if they hear of anything, they'll keep you in mind and let you know. And I think the nice thing about that too is like you said earlier, you don't actually have to sell, right? When somebody has a project that you might be a good fit for, they'll just kind of raise their hand and say, hey, this came up, and I need someone, or this popped into my inbox, and my colleague is looking for somebody. So it's hugely efficient.
Yeah, I love that you brought up staying top of mind, because I think when you think about relationship building, you think about, like, one, building those relationships in the first place, right? And building your community in the first place, but nurturing those relationships and staying in touch with people is also so important, right? So I love that you brought up kind of like checking in with those peers and colleagues, whether it's a quick phone call or whether it's an email, because it's true. We all get really, really busy, right? And there might be opportunities to bring somebody up, but if we haven't talked to that person recently, maybe they're not top of mind. And so I love that you brought that up as like a big part of the strategy, is like maintaining those relationships and nurturing those relationships. Don't just build it once, tell people what you do, and kind of expect to be top of mind for them. It's really about the long game, right? Continuing to nurture, continuing to build, and doing favors in reverse, right? The more favors that you can do for people, the more favors that they're willing to do for you. It's Andrea and I talk about this a lot. We say, like, you really have to give to get, and especially in the beginning. And sometimes we don't have the opportunity to do that when we're first like building our freelance careers. But any opportunity that you do have to refer somebody, or to name drop somebody, or to bring somebody up, you should absolutely be doing it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I guess the thing I would add to that is give strategically. There's a fantastic book called Give and Take by a Wharton professor, Adam Grant. And the book is all about like what are the kind of drivers of success as it relates to relationships. And there have been a bunch of studies on this that he details in the book, about how givers tend to perform either in the top 5th percentile or the bottom 5th percentile, depending on their approach, right? And the difference is whether they give strategically, right? And so they're thinking through, where are the places and that I can make the most impact, who are the types of people and organizations with whom I can make the most impact, and they're making it their kind of mission to give to those folks, right? And not just sort of wildly volunteer their time, or money or expertise for like any old person or organization where maybe they can't have the best impact. And I think when I think about that, as it relates to freelancing, I think that's really about thinking about the opportunities where you can give back that are going to make the most difference for people, right? And oftentimes that can take the form of something like, putting together a free workshop on something that you're an expert in, for a group who's really going to benefit, right? So, if you're a designer, right, putting together a free workshop on how, developers or marketers, can understand design better, can do a better job, for example, could make a huge difference, right? Those folks are in complementary roles, so they're not competing with you, right? Chances are they want to know more about what you do. So it's really good for them, but it's also very helpful for you.
I love that. That's a great strategic way to build those relationships, right? Is by helping teach and letting other people learn from you and like view you as a resource. I think that's wonderful. Either of you, Andrea or Tim, and Andrea, I know that you all already gave like a little bit of background on this, but I'm sure you have more to add. But I would love to just hear from both of you on like how that relationship building has impacted your career specifically. Andrea, you want to jump in?
It got me into freelancing, frankly, because I had a colleague who had left full-time work and knew that I was thinking about it. And she was like, I have a client. If you make the jump, I can carve out this project for you. And she helped me also think about, it's really scary to make that leap. Think about what I needed financially, right? How I needed to think about my hourly rate, what I needed to make, because now all of a sudden I was going to be responsible for my own healthcare, my own, like I would have to carve out retirement, I would have to pay my taxes, all of that. So I was just very lucky to have an amazing mentor when I made the jump that helped me get into my first project. But then everything else really did come from relationship building and doing a lot of the things that we've talked about today, having all those coffee dates, reminding people what you're doing, making the connections. Don't be afraid to talk about what you're doing, everything. And I would say the other benefit it's had to me is that I've been able to hear from other freelancers about how they structure their business. And that also really helped me to think about how I wanted my freelance business to work. Early on, I charged hourly, and I obviously wasn't as senior in my career. And so it was much more tactical work. I think as I've grown and developed and built these relationships and seen how other people have built their freelance business, it's inspired me to think about just the other options that are out there.
Yep.
Samantha, we're very, very specific about who we go after now. I used to take any project, which is totally fine because that's what I needed to do to survive. And now we're able to actually say, hey, I'm only taking these types of clients, these types of projects, because that's where we excel. So it's been helpful for a lot of reasons for us and for me personally.
Yes.
And I don't think I can ever go back to a real W-2 job anymore.
Andrea is the queen of coffee dates. Whenever we were working at Interimly and we'd be like, okay, we need another client. Like we have a contract ending in 2 months. We're going to need to like drum up new business and drum up another client. She's like, all right, let me do my 3 coffee dates and see what comes from it. And every single time, like, even if, they knew somebody who knew somebody, they put our name out there. And so even like, a 30-minute coffee catch up with an old friend is such a great way to like drum up new business. And we really just have to do it and have to put in the effort. Yeah. So beneficial.
Yeah.
And Tim, what about for you?
Yeah, I can't overstate how much of an impact it's made. I think every single one of my clients, came from some kind of relationship, whether it's, somebody I knew from, previous full-time job, or, a friend of a friend of a friend, or, a colleague of somebody I met at a networking event, right? It's been basically my entire business. In fact, I've gotten 3 referrals this month, 2 from a current client, 1 from a former client. And I think a lot of people right now are talking about, how hard it is out there, just given a lot of the stuff that's going on with the economy and volatility, particularly if you work in e-com or tech.
Mhm.
And for me, honestly, I've been really fortunate to be pretty insulated from a lot of that. Mostly because people are sending business my way.
Yep.
And so I think the impact has just been huge. I wouldn't have a business at all, frankly, without it. Certainly not one that's been as successful as I've been lucky to be.
Yeah, I love that you bring up like the market volatility and your freelance business in relation to that, because that's something that Andrea and I also went through when we were freelancing during COVID, right? It was kind of a similar situation to what it is right now. A lot of people were either being laid off or it kind of felt like work was drying up. And Andrea and I were like, wow, what does this mean? What is this going to mean for our business moving forward? Are we going to have enough work? Are we going to have to do all this extra work to drum up new business? What is it going to look like? And our business actually got busier, right? Like we actually found that during like that economic downturn, we were actually still getting a ton of business, but it all came from referrals. Every single piece of business that we got came from referrals. And so I love that you brought that up, because relationship building and building that referral network is really a way for you to like cushion your business during economic downturns and make sure that your business is sustainable long term.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I had a very similar experience during COVID. My business grew,
Mm-hmm.
and I think in large part that's because of those referrals and those relationships. And I think when times are tough, right, it doesn't mean that businesses aren't still looking to grow.
Yep.
It just means they're going to be more strategic about it, and that means they want to work with people who they trust, right? And
Absolutely.
they're going to be more discerning about that, and having either a prior relationship or somebody who says, like you should work with him. He's really good at this thing that you need, and I've worked with him, and you can trust him to get the job done. That makes a huge difference.
Yes, absolutely. It's almost like the freelance version of nepotism, right? Like if you have these relationships and you build them, you are just so much more likely to land that next gig or get a conversation with a client. Like it's just how it works, right? And it's so important. As we're wrapping things up here, Tim, I know that we've covered a ton today, right? We've kind of gone all over the place in terms of relationship building and the benefits and how to build relationships, how much time to spend. But any other advice that you have for freelancers, whether they're just starting out or have been in freelancing for 10 years, just anything else related to relationship building?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, more than anything else, I'd say, put in the effort, and own your sales and marketing process.
Yeah.
I think that there are so many freelancers who kind of outsource that sales and marketing to, the Upworks of the world, but even the like higher tier sort of freelance job boards, right? Toptail, things like that.
Mhm.
You are never going to be as successful as you would be if you're in control of your own destiny. And I think the key to that really is relationships, and being proactive.
Mhm. I love that. Absolutely. I 100% agree with everything you just said. And Andrea, anything else on your end? Any last tips or tricks?
No, I think Tim really nailed it. You got to put in the work. And in fact, this is kind of inspiring me also. I'm like, I should send a couple follow-up emails, reach out to a few folks. You never
Well,
know what the next 4 months are going to look like. You never know when your client is, the client is going to churn. So
absolutely. Well, and that's the purpose of this, right? To inspire
yeah.
people to actually take the time, put in the effort, build those relationships. Um, awesome. This has been really great. Tim, I know that you already mentioned your course that you have on relationship building, but if people that are listening in have more questions for you following, or just want to follow you on social media and keep up, where can they find you? How should they get in touch?
Yeah. So, definitely can check out my site, freelancegps.com. There's a ton of free resources on there. One of the resources I offer to everyone who signs up for the course is you can actually book a free strategy call with me and, you know, talk through where you are on, you know, in your business. And, you know, I can kind of help get you unstuck if you're feeling stuck.
Awesome.
So definitely check out my website. You can find me on Twitter. I refuse to call it by its new name as well.
Same.
You know, you can always shoot me an email on my website too. So you know, I'm around. I'm excited to help. It's a huge passion of mine. So don't feel shy if you want to get some feedback. I'm there.
Awesome. And I know, Andrea, you're not as active on the socials, but if anybody wants to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Probably LinkedIn is the safest place these days.
Fair. Every once in a while I get Andrea to send out a tweet or two and it feels really good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a minute.
But if you want to get in touch with myself or Harlow, we're both very active on social media. I'm at Samantha Anderl across basically every social media platform, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, a little bit on TikTok recently, building up a following there. So you can get in touch with me. And then Meet Harlow is just at Meet Harlow across all social platforms. And we talk about relationship building and really kind of freelancing A to Z all the time. So if you want to get in touch with any of us, that's how you do it. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. This is really awesome.
Thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, I mean, you inspired Andrea and I like while on this call. So I'm really looking forward to other people listening in and also getting inspired.